Hello, welcome to our webinar today on the Clean Electrification Maturity Model. My name is Jeff Varney, and I will be one of the participants that are walking you through really a joint effort between APQC and IBM that has not just gone on for the last year or two, but we've been working together around energy and utilities for more than 12, 14 years in a number of different ways. So I don't want to spend too much time up front here because I want to get to the content, but on the screen you'll see my title, Director of Advisory Services. I work with most of our maturity model efforts at APQC, working with both internally and external partners like IBM. And so this was a natural project for myself and others on my advisory team to support. Kirsten Palmer is also with us today, and she'll be speaking in a moment. And she is part of the Institute for Business Value at IBM. And she particularly leads benchmarking and data, performance data, including analysis, analytics, and some of the really compelling content that they produce that really sets the stage for leaders and people that are really driving towards improvement across a segment of multiple industries, et cetera. And then Francis Puglisi is also here. He's part of the Energy, Environment, and Utilities group at IBM Consulting. And he is really the driver for the development of this model and really how they drive that center of excellence for energy. So that's who's talking today. I'm going to go ahead and hand off to Kirsten at this point and let her walk us through really a little bit more about IBV.
Thank you, Jeff. And, you know, as the world, excuse me, really moves more towards data-driven ways of doing businesses, you know, benchmarking and open standards and maturity models, those all become very integral to how companies achieve success. And IBM has a very long history of benchmarking and performance management. And we've really embraced open standards, working with partners, and in particular partners such as APQC. I am part of IBM's Institute for Business Value. The IBV is really a think tank that helps organizations capitalize on new business opportunities to drive and to sustain innovation, market differentiation, industry leadership. We have about 60 consultants that work across 14 different countries. We have about 17 different industries of expertise represented across the team. We particularly focus around, I would say, three things: data-driven research and expert analysis. Secondly, prescriptive recommendations, really to address the most pressing marketplace opportunities and challenges. And third, around performance data, facilitating comparative analysis, quantifying cases for change, which is the area that I actually specialize in. And if we go back to about 2007, IBM worked with APQC, and we founded the first Global Intelligent Utility Network Coalition. That kind of evolved eventually into what was the first smart grid maturity model that was used, you know, around the world by utilities to assess and plan and, you know, implement their smart grid programs. And then we fast forward into about 2021, and IBM and APQC began working on the new model for utilities, which was clean electrification. And Francis, he has been leading this initiative from IBM and working with Jeff and the APQC team. And today they're going to tell you a little bit about the model and start sharing with you some early findings. So Francis, I want to turn back over to you to kind of talk about the clean electrification model.
Great, thank you, Kirsten. And you can hear me okay, I hope. First of all, welcome to everyone who's taking time today or watching the replay. We're very excited to be able to share with you not only this innovative new initiative, which combines a lot of research from IBM's IBV, from APQC's initiative, with real practical experience from IBM Consulting, which is my home within IBM. We're going to divide this into 4 areas, leaving lots of time for questions at the end. So please either note your questions or put them in the chat. I'll spend the first 5 minutes really explaining what we're trying to accomplish now. Why now? What prompted us to begin this new initiative last year called the Clean Electrification Maturity Model. We'll spend at least 10 minutes going into detail in what's in the Clean Electrification Maturity Model. We'll talk about the different characteristics. We'll share some examples of what the reports would look like for all utilities that participate. And then Jeff will talk to us in more depth about some of the findings. We already have over 57 utilities that have completed the model, that have agreed to have their results confidentially benchmarked. And we already have some initial findings. We want to share those with you as well. So without further ado, let's move forward here, and I will see if I can make the screen change. There we go. So section 1, why now? Move it forward again, great. So the compelling reason for us to come together and participate in this, about a 6-month effort to focus on clean electrification, was really the realization that our utility clients and utilities around the world are facing a new energy era. A new energy area that's governed by changes in expectations from customers, changes in technology, changes in the way in which processes and customer services, and very importantly, changes in market forces, new market realities, new competition, new opportunities. So in this slide, you'll see that we talk about what we talk about are the 4 Ds of acceleration of change, and this increasing focus by society on having to have cleaner energy. Another driving focus is the need for ecosystems. The traditional sort of monopolistic way of delivering electricity from over 100 years now is breaking down around the world. And there are various new network configuration, new players, new ecosystems evolving. This is a very important strategic change. Digital technologies, and we don't need to go into all of them now, but that is one of the key components of the maturity model. Everything from cybersecurity, from artificial intelligence, from IoT, new forms of communication, mobility, all of these things fall into the digital technology category. The need for utilities to be more transparent, to have a better ownership and sharing of their progress towards cleaner energy. And finally, we realize that there is a wave, a very, very large wave of investment that's going to occur in this industry in the next several years. And we wanted to make sure that our customers not only understood our perspective on these investments, but also that they're ready, that they're planning ahead, that they're not waiting until the last year of a particular software license in order to consider the future. So for all of these reasons, we wanted to take a comprehensive look at transforming to a clean energy future. And the market is also telling us all very clearly that clean electrification is a key component to both growing economies and to ensuring sustainable growth. These bar charts on the left sort of illustrate how electricity is going to take a larger percentage of the energy pie over the coming years, expected to double the percentage of electricity in the overall energy mix as we see movement towards green transportation, obviously EVs, but beyond EVs into green transportation in both the rail and trucking, as we see companies install more DER capabilities. All of this is going to lead to a very large increase in the generation of electricity. And all this is all very, very important, but it also brings about both challenges and opportunities for utilities. And what some of those challenges are that we touch upon here in our final introductory slide is that utilities need to understand that their role is evolving from just management of the grid and ensuring security of supply, safety, transparency, reliability, to being able to manage and ecosystem of energy partners. And this is a crucial change in their role. And many utilities in many markets around the world are already welcoming this new role. But in some areas, utilities are moving a little slower. And we wanted to really take a look at what are some of these drivers, what are some of the areas. So you see around this diagram, the kinds of issues, the kinds of challenges and opportunities that utilities are dealing with. Final note to the IBV and some of the great research they do there. In some of our recent studies, we've polled chief CXOs, we call them, right? So the whole C-suite. And we have seen that there is a large increase in the percentage of investment going to digital technologies, and also that in the minds of the executives, the challenge and opportunities brought by technological change are actually the number one challenge, the number one sort of the business strategy that they're focusing on to drive growth moving forward. So as we move forward now, and let's focus on the model itself, let me just tell you a bit about what it is expected to do. It is structured around 200 different characteristics divided across these 8 domains you see in our sort of windmill shape here at the top. So we look, and we'll be going through each of those domains in some detail, but we were looking not just to focus on technology, right? Not just to focus on some of those key processes around grid and asset management or customer service. We really wanted to look comprehensively. And so in order to do that, we need to involve a lot of people. So my primary role was coordinating in a structured manner over 100 different experts in these domains from both inside of IBM and outside of IBM. APQC are participating all along the way to make sure that we did really an analysis of each of these domains and identified what are those key characteristics that are driving progress in utilities around the world, right? Of course, APQC has a lot of experience in structuring these types of tools, which they took the lead in structuring the design of this maturity model. And we also wanted to make sure that we included a lot of specific examples of technology, examples of cybersecurity strategies, examples of risk management approaches. And so we embedded these experiences, which you've observed in our work with utilities around the world. We embedded these into the actual questions that make up the maturity model. And we'll share a couple of those with you now. So our hope is that by the end of this webinar, if your utility hasn't already participated, that we'll share enough and pique your interest enough that you'll want to log on, complete this maturity model, and be part of our growing group of companies that are taking a look at leading practices in this area. So the 8 domains, and please do note the questions. I see there's some questions coming up here. We will get to them at the end, but I want to make sure that we get through the heart of this. 8 different areas or domains, we call them. And each of these 8 areas has 25 questions laid out in varying levels of maturity. How did we decide what to include in each of the domains? Well, this is where we relied upon those 100+ subject matter experts. So we brought in former executives to talk about the strategy and leadership domain, talk about the importance of vision, the importance of stakeholder management and regulatory relations, the importance of comprehensive finance and risk management. We brought in specialists from the human talent and transformation areas to talk about new trends in motivating employees, the increasing competition in the market for attracting talent, and what are some of the strategies companies are using to retain their talent in a world which seems to constantly sort of incentivize folks trying a number of different careers throughout their lifetime. In the technology area, obviously within IBM, we have a strong point of view. So we brought folks in from, I mentioned already, our security area, but also in data management, advanced analytics, AI, blockchain, a lot of these areas which are many utilities are already experimenting with, but relatively few utilities have put in place sort of production level solutions based on digital technologies. Sustainability on everyone's minds. We wanted to go just beyond typical ESG reporting and take a look at what utilities are doing to involve their employees, to educate their communities, to take a look holistically, not just at specific metrics, but of how their utility can really use its brand to influence and to guide the movement towards clean electrification. And on the more operational side, we brought in folks, electrical engineers and folks that are currently working at utilities to talk about the latest technologies and their needs around grid operations, taking a look at reliability, energy efficiency, the integration of DERs and clean renewables. In work and asset management, we took a look at the value chain from the identification of projects to the budgeting, the planning, the management, the implementation, everything that's involved with predictive maintenance. We took a look at what new technologies are being brought onto the market to sort of break that manual-based approach to maintenance and take a look at embedding AI capabilities into predictive maintenance solutions. Customer experience, we took a look at what a lot of utilities are doing around the world in not just the improving their net promoter scores, if you will, but to actually create a bond, create a relationship with their customers and retain those customers. As more energy alternatives are becoming available, utilities are struggling to maintain their customers, sometimes their largest, most profitable customers. And so what can be done in that area to create more retention? And finally, innovation. This was a brand new area, an area that we feel is a critical differentiator in how utilities are preparing not only their companies, their organizations, but preparing their customers for new market opportunities, right? We saw many utilities are sort of, being sort of second movers in this space. And so we wanted to identify utilities that are taking proactive steps to position themselves as leaders, as influencers in the evolution of the market. So those were our 8 domains, right? Each one of them backed up, as I mentioned, by 25 questions. And the 25 questions we laid out in 5 levels of maturity. Being a maturity model, we wanted to make sure that everyone who participates could clearly see, based on their responses, where they lie in this spectrum of capabilities. And so we tried to make level 1, sort of comprehensive. So most all utilities should already and are already evaluating a lot of new innovation in these different domains. And most utilities, I'll say, are also developing, maybe not in all domains, but are developing new solutions based on artificial intelligence and mobility and so forth. So the first 2 domains are really about establishing a basis of where utilities are today. But then those folks that are sort of leading the charge and that are implementing at a sort of a large scale production level, we sort of define that as what we call an implementing level of maturity. Organizations which show an enterprise-wide commitment to transforming themselves, that are looking at not just projects as an asset management project or in any particular area, but look at all projects across the enterprise and are breaking down what sometimes folks refer to as a sort of departmental silos or sort of chimneys within the organization. That's a critical part of being able to transform, is to look across the enterprise. So we looked very much for those characteristics. Level 4, living it, is where organizations have already started putting these expectations into their performance management plan, that they have active programs underway to raise the level of understanding of their employees and to recognize and reward employees that are bringing forward new suggestions, new solutions, new ways to contribute to this new energy era for their company. And finally, there are those that are leaders, as I mentioned, that are breaking new ground, that are out there, of course, well in front of the pack, and that are exploring new market niches. In many cases, utilities that are defining new markets for their energy services. So again, at a summary level, we wanted to create a broad enough scale so all utilities could see where they are and also identify areas that they might like to progress to or aspire to in the coming years. So what does this tool look like? If, and hopefully all of you will want to participate with us in this tool, it is an interactive file that has these 200 questions laid out across those domains. It can be taken individually and filled out by yourselves. We offer offer to both APQC and IBM to guide you through the process. So we've worked with a couple of dozen utilities to walk them through these different domains. Some of the new technologies take some discussion, some explanation. In these interactive sessions, we sort of call them sort of workshops. They are very interesting as utilities are trying to understand when we talk about new strategies, new technologies for risk management. Well, what exactly are we talking to? Can we have some examples? So we get into discussions when we engage about what we're seeing in leading utilities around the world, what types of technology, how it's being implemented, what are some of those strategies to retain, to both attract and retain talent. So it's a great opportunity to both explore where the companies are today and to hear about what some of the other leading utilities are doing today. Again, 200 questions. In our workshop sessions, it usually takes an entire morning or afternoon, so 3 hours or so to work through these questions. And we also can break it up into several sessions if that is preferable. Often some of these areas require some very specific expertise from the company. So we have been in a number of clients broken it into a series of sessions. So no one has to sit through all 3 hours, and they can just focus on the hour or so that would be relevant to their area of expertise. Now, a little bit more depth about what these questions would look like. And I just wanted to pull out a couple of examples. I have one here from customer experience, and we'll talk about work and asset management in a moment. It's very important to, when you're focused on customer, to sort of see the evolution from utilities today that are perfectly capable and comfortable with having their employees' data, being able to segment customers and deal with them in sort of like large groups or segments, right? That's sort of the traditional way of looking. But many utilities today go much beyond that and are actually using advanced modeling, combining data from various sources to create profiles of their customers and identify which of those customers are really the most valuable to them. And then based on that, identify new programs and services and marketing outreach to target those customers. That's really what about the customer experience domain is about, right? Very important that this continues to focus, that utilities continue to focus on driving revenue, obviously from their customers, right? Understanding the sort of the life cycle of their customers, recruiting customers early on. So there's a heavy influence here of outreach programs and what utilities are doing to be innovative in reaching out and attracting their customers. And of course, the use of advanced analytics, artificial intelligence, and so forth, in combination with digital marketing technologies and some of the latest technologies in the market, sort of make up the spectrum of maturity for customer experience. In the work and asset management side, again, utilities all have capabilities, strong capabilities in place to understand their asset base, to perform maintenance on that asset base. They have analyses and processes in place to try to avoid outages and so forth. But this category is really about how are utilities using some predictive maintenance, integrating real-time information flows from the field, utilizing drones, even satellite technology, integrating all of that information into a data lake type of environment and running advanced analytics or artificial intelligence routines on this data. That's sort of what you'll see in this work and asset management area as well. So again, with that as sort of a discussion of the details of what each of these domains, the level of detail we'll be going into in these questions and discussions, we lay out your results, the utilities results, in one of these 5 different levels compared to how other utilities are performing. And so with the blue dots here, we sort of laid out what a current maturity sort of graphic might look like. But the next step, and why is this important to utilities? That may be interesting in and of itself, comparing your technology maturity versus grid operations maturity. But the real value to the utilities is in using this information for internal planning and discussions and hopefully investments, right? With this wave of investment coming in, with this wave of digital technology, it's important to have a clear vision and roadmap to where to invest, right? Where to focus not only limited dollars, but limited hours in the day, right? Limited skilled resources. So this exercise will permit you to have those discussions, take a look at how other utilities are performing, and I'll show you some of the reports in a moment, and really start to develop an impression of, well, we may be at level 3 in organization and culture today, but we are dealing with retention issues, and we are dealing with an aging workforce issue. So we really need to up our game in this particular area. What are other utilities doing? Not only utilities, what are other companies in the market doing to help with some of these processes? So this is really the real value to utilities. And again, judging by the 57, 58 companies that have already participated in the first 6 months that we've gone live here, we really would like to see all of you engage in this process as well, and take it, once you have the reports, and that my sort of final slide will be to share a bit about the reports here. If it'll move forward, there we go. So once you complete this exercise, APQC will apply it confidentially against their database of benchmarking results, and will issue you a report. This report will only go to you. It's your report. You decide whether you want to share it with others or not. So that's very important to mention. I'm sure Jeff will talk about it as well. And that report will not only sort of show in this sort of red, yellow, green diagram you see here, where in each of the domains your results sort of place you. It will also do comparisons with different peer groups. They may be peer groups of utilities a certain size. They may be utilities in your market, in your state, in your country for international companies, or it may be utilities that function under certain regulatory schemes. APQC has been very flexible, and they're very quick to respond to questions. I've been working personally with a couple of utilities in Japan who've completed this and had analyzed their results already and had some follow-up questions and wanted to understand. They had considered themselves, top performance in certain areas. Grid operations comes to mind, but they realized that there were some technologies that they weren't yet utilizing. So they reached out to talk to IBM, talk to APQC about what are some of those characteristics, and more importantly, what other utilities might they be able to speak with to facilitate an exchange of ideas and leading practices. So again, APQC will be producing these reports, sending them out to your company, and they will be yours to do with what you like. They won't go any further than that until you decide to engage and participate in the community that's being formed here. Okay, so with that, Jeff, could you talk a little bit about APQC's role? And I promise some of those findings that we've already identified.
Absolutely, thanks, Francis. And Francis has touched on some of APQC's role along the way here. The first part was to really help, just like we did back in the creation of the Smart Grid Maturity Model in the 2007, 2008, 2009 timeframe. To help to just bring some maturity model tool set basics and integrity basics to the team. And as we went out to that extended group of subject matter experts and stakeholders, be able to harness the energy and the passions and the needs into something that could give us a little bit more of a deterministic snapshot. Both, as Francis mentioned, in order to support the ability to kind of create a path for the future. What are your aspirations? What are your needs? And what does it look like relative to this maturity structure? So you can now decide when and how much and how fast you want to move forward, or whether it's relevant at all for your particular organization. So helping to design and orchestrate and build out then the tool set itself and administer the tool set from the back background on the data collection to be an impartial third party where organizations can submit their assessments, whether they've done a self-assessment, whether APQC has assisted them, or whether IBM or some other partner might assist them in using this tool set, such that we now receive that information, we protect the information, we validate to say, are there anomalies or inconsistencies in the data received to ensure the highest accuracy of the scoring report that is provided back to that organization the assessment represents. So that's number one role for us going forward, is to ensure that there's a support mechanism, and then that clearinghouse to be able to then also take the aggregate views and make sure that goes into subsequent reports. So you can see those demographic or other types of peer comparisons that you will see on the report itself. So that's the second part of APQC's role, is to be able to actually help on the scoring, reporting, and the integrity of the data. And the final step is to then working with IBM and others as necessary and appropriate that want to contribute, talk about what it means and how the results that we're seeing may help to drive trends, go off and do some additional targeted best practice research where perhaps everyone's struggling and there aren't considered to be leading in best practices. There's a number of ways that we want to support the community going forward in this regard. So that's a high level description of our role. And I'm going to kind of jump forward more into what have we seen so far. So if we look at the maturity model itself and the 8 domains, and you may have seen this if you're familiar with the previous smart grid, there are some overlaps and similarities in the domains. But as Francis said, what's inside the domain has changed dramatically. You may not find a single characteristic in this entire model that was in the original smart grid model. We've evolved, we've gone further to say what's relevant today in a decade, in 20 or 30 years. So we were looking to the future and evolving the tool set for the industry itself. And as you look across this, the first set of findings that represents, in this case, 39 of the 59, we haven't incorporated everyone, but just looking at it from a transmission distribution provider, whether they're vertically integrated, whether they're regulated, deregulated, or some combination, or whether they're just doing transmission, just distribution, we focused on that subset of the data to date. We do also have some data that shows generation-only organizations, but this view here, I just wanted to be clear, represents kind of the transmission distribution view. And what you'll see there is overall, on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being that kind of high-level leading maturity, in most cases, most domains, we're in that 1 to 2 range. People are really getting started towards these new next generation views of what it means to evolve and support a more market-based clean electrification energy mix, so to speak. With that, really then the big differences here is a strong focus on the sustainability side and the market innovation, as Francis mentioned. So you'll see, again, the data here shows where we are today, aggregate across that data set of transmission distribution organizations. And again, where we see a few strengths here, maybe that's an anomaly with the data set we've got, organ culture for a combinatorial type of both regulated, deregulated blend organization. So we're looking at it across a larger enterprise that they've got to, and maybe by the nature of that organization, they have to do some things at a very high level organizationally, right? But we'll see how that holds up as we go to after more data, which I'll talk about in a moment, and the timeline we'll see and refine these numbers, because this is really a living data set. And when the data set that exists when a new organization submits their data, that's what will be used for their aggregate comparisons. We don't just say, here's the 2021 or the 2022. It's here's our data set relevant today. If we got someone in last week, your report comes in today, it will include every validated participant at that point. So these will move subtly over time, but this is a good indicator of initial trends. So I'm really going to move on to some really targeted findings, which is on the next slide. We took the data set and we said, well, what's the kind of top quartile versus the rest of the data set doing differently? What are they doing more or more likely to be doing, is the way we phrased it on this slide. And while there were a number, there were literally 40 or 50 observations where they might be, twice as likely or 5 times more likely to do something, but we went after a couple of the really significant ones here. So for instance, that top quartile organization right? This is top quartile across all the domains, not just within a single domain. They were 7 times more likely to have done comprehensive need analysis across their entire ecosystem, not just in parts, not just in one maybe domain or segment of their business, but across their organization. They've gone off and looked at what and defined what that ecosystem is, and then made sure that they looked at it from all different angles to say, how do we fit? Where are we leading? Where are we lagging? Where are we contributing? Where are we maybe just watching? And that point of having done that and understanding their ecosystem and where they play, 7 times more likely. Now, if you think about that, there's a lot of, as I mentioned there, components to get there, right? What are our ecosystems? Is there one or are there multiple? Who are the players in that ecosystem? And where are they? Partners? Are they competitors? Are they contributors and suppliers? Are they the customers and the consumers, right? So you have to really understand ecosystem basics to really then move forward here. So again, just an example there, that there are a set of organizations, that top tier, that have really done this comprehensive ecosystem analysis. Now, in organ culture, 22 times more likely to have gone into proactive knowledge sharing with performance expectations and goals, right? You notice knowledge sharing, if you're familiar again with the old smart grid model, the knowledge sharing element wasn't really there. There were a few implicit elements, but now front and center, we're looking at how do you capture, transfer, and encourage and leverage the reuse of knowledge, right? That proactive sense. And again, these top performers are doing it 22 times rather more likely to have really tackled knowledge sharing. And again, it's meant to be comprehensively across the kind of footprint of clean electrification and the future of this kind of market-based organizational approach. I can keep reading here. You'll see on the technology side, integrating into workflows the data science and tooling, right? What does that mean, right? Data science, on the fly, real-time analytics and data enablement around not just decision making, but around some of the more subtle nuances of ensuring the proper tuning and tweaking and alignment of what's happening within some complex workflows here. So through process automation, data enablement, in some cases that extends then into the AI and machine learning competencies, that it's not just that you have to go off and look for them and find them somewhere else, but it's there at the point of where the work is being done. So that's an evolution, again, of technology integration to the way and the enablement of more comprehensive and enabling, and as you can imagine, more proactive or near real-time adaptation of the workflow to fit what's actually occurring. Sustainability, again, another item here around sustainability goals. The key on this one was often there are sustainability goals that are established, they may be communicated, but how those then are translated and flow down within the organization, and then how are people compliant towards established targets and the reporting consistency. That's the key here, ensuring compliance, that people are not only just seeing them and agreeing to them, but now reporting and aligning and then driving their work activities towards those sustainability goals. And that's really part of that closed loop. What gets measured gets done is one of the phrases you often hear. And so compliance is one way to ensure there's visibility and that people are following through. And it's not just talking it, but it's doing it. So I'm not going to read the rest of these. Again, you've probably read ahead and have seen a few of those, but we can certainly come back to those during the Q&A portion of the conversation. Just a little bit of a note at the bottom there to say that across the 8 domains, we've only seen one utility to date that has been able to rate themselves at the highest against the aggregate peer group in 7 of the 8 domains. As you saw on the earlier slide, most organizations in the aggregate is really down in the level 1 to level 2 range in most cases. I will tell you, in the case of this utility, it's got kind of a very self-contained market, which allowed them to move faster with more confidence. And that allowed them to be a little bit ahead of some of the more complex markets and regulatory kind of environments we may see. But there are examples of best practice, right? And we can learn from that. And that's one of our goals here, is to not to just say, hey, someone is doing this, but then that gives us the opportunity to maybe research and identify leading practices, what worked, what didn't work, and then figure out how that can be adapted to enable others to move forward to the level they need to get to. So that's part of what's behind our efforts here. I'm going to go ahead and just cover a couple of other real quick topics, and then we'll get to Q&A. As Francis mentioned, at the time that we printed these or put these slides together, we were at 57. I checked this morning, we've got 59 utilities at this point that have contributed and are part of the data set. That's fresh off the presses this morning. And our goal, we're working to, but by the end of the year, have over 100 network or utilities that are part of this, right? And that's globally across all markets, shapes, and sizes of organizations, because that's what gives the data really power. When we can go and do some peer comparisons around different things, regulated versus non-regulated, as we said, or deregulated, we can also look at other types of those, whether they're public or private, whether they are a certain size, whether it's in revenue or number of meters or some other comparison set there. So we're working, and one of the opportunities is that while we work towards getting to that 100, I'll say Francis mentioned where they've worked with a few of the IBM partnerships and their existing relationships that they've got, and they've brought in some of the existing. APQC went out and actually coordinated the collection of 50 utilities. Now, I think it's 50 of the 59. I think APQC has directly gone out, contacted, and brought in those assessments from all but 4. I think IBM maybe have brought in 4 or 5 of those. And that's really where APQC is working to go out, connect with utilities directly, see where this fits, whether or not the timing is right. And by the end of the year, having over 100 in the data set. They'll have their own individualized reports against the aggregate. It'll help them to do, as Francis showed, establish some of those, where are we? But then the logical question is, where should we be? Where do we need to be? How quickly do we need to get there? Where are we lagging, and can we learn from our peers? Where are we lagging and we need to catch up to our peers? Again, not necessarily from a competitive situation, but as you think about clean electrification and you think about the market and distributed or DER, right? And some of the other factors for where you see pressure on the total energy mix, so to speak, and how we maintain, from a T&D perspective, the grid and the economics that go there with this evolution into other sources of electrification that may not flow across the grid or have to flow back onto the grid, as we've talked about previously. So understanding that mix is very important, and everybody being able to have the right balance. That ecosystem perspective and market perspective are critical for the success if those are pressures that you're going to see and are going to continue to evolve over time. So one of the things I mentioned is that we will be doing analytics on the data set itself, and between APQC and IBV at IBM, we'll be then publishing additional observations and insight reports as the data merits, and through the analytics and what we learn through the engagement with the community itself. And we welcome anybody to offer questions, queries of what you're interested in, or insights that you might want to share and contribute to our reporting. Those are all viable. This is really meant to be a community engagement, and we want community involvement as best as possible. So that's where we're going. We're working towards 100 by end of year. And the real question is, how can you get involved there and be part of this if the timing is right for you? And so we provided a couple of links on this slide that you can go to and get more information on the APQC link. You can download a sample of the assessment, and you can also get started and actually then coordinate submission of an assessment, whether APQC helps you, whether a third party helps you, whether IBM helps you, or whether you do it yourself. APQC is really the clearinghouse. IBM with additional links to some very compelling content, and also a link back to where you can get started through APQC. Those are some links for you to use there. Through the end of this year, it's free. Anyone can participate and contribute without any fees at all. At some point, as we get through and get this started, we'll transition to the point where we have to kind of recover our operational cost at APQC to process the data set, et cetera. So there will be a fee associated at that point. So great opportunity now while we're still in this initial phase to contribute, get the value without that extra cost. But if the timing's not right, it doesn't mean it goes away. But again, we'll have that published with the fees and the timelines. It shouldn't be overly restrictive from a cost perspective, but just wanted to put that out there now if that's going to be an issue for you. So I'm gonna kind of go. I think the next slide is Q&A, but I wanted to just offer for both Kirsten and Francis, if there are other things you want to add to what I've said so far, please, by all means, jump in at this point while we see if there's any questions from the participants.
I had to get off mute. This is Kirsten. Actually, Jeff and Francis, well, I think you did a great job summarizing the model and the findings and where we are today and how people can participate. So I have nothing else to add, and you know, I'm happy to answer any questions that the group may have.
Yeah, and Jeff, I'll just contribute maybe to kick off the discussion, some questions that I've received from companies that we've worked with on the Clean Electrification Maturity Model. One came from companies, utilities in deregulated markets that wanted to focus on certain domains only within the model. And so the question was, can we just complete the domains which are relevant, or are we required to complete all the domains? And as you will verify, we said absolutely that utilities are welcome to focus, if they're in a deregulated market, focus on those areas which are relevant to their business model. And we can work with those results and then sort of group them in peers accordingly for the comparative processes. Jeff, any adjustment to that explanation?
No, I think that that's the key, is that our goal behind all of this is for any organization to find value and use it for the value that exhibits itself. So in the report technologies automatically generate a report that's comprehensive. But if you skip a level or you skip an entire domain, you'll see that those are zeroed out effectively, and that's perfectly okay. On our part, we want to make sure those don't skew the aggregate results. So there's a little bit of management on our side. But again, use it where there's value is really the bottom line there. And we'll find ways to enable you going forward. With that being said, I'll also maybe just build on a question that we often got, which was more around the lines of, do we have to do this formally, right? Is there a way for us, for instance, and this gets into some of the techniques organizations will use the model in, we've got 4 operating regions, and do we have to do it across all 4 at the same time? Can we do them individually, right? If we're going to do it an enterprise view across those 4, do we have to submit 4 individual, or do we have to submit 1 aggregate at the top? And those are great questions. And what we find is that you may, if you do it enterprise wide, you may lose some of the fidelity because you kind of meet in the middle, so to speak, between the variations between operating regions. So our recommendation typically is to do it at those discrete operating entities. And if you need us to then generate some comparison views where you've got 3, 5, or 8 different groups, we're happy to work with you. And then you can reconcile between them and determine whether there is some aggregation that you do before you get the final report, or whether the 4 individual or however many individual reports make more sense. So if you've got questions along those lines as to where you apply this, enterprise-wide versus at some sub-segment of your organization, hopefully that gives you a sense, because that question has come up over and over again for us. Any other questions? There's the Q&A tool, or you can raise your hand. I'm not sure if I can see that, but if not, there's always an opportunity through the links that we'll provide. And I'll say this kind of, as we're going through, we will send out a follow-up email, and that will allow you to see the slides. The slides will be attached. And from a recording perspective, for those that couldn't attend today, or if someone had to leave early, that they'll be able to come in and listen to the rest of this. But we encourage you, if there are additional questions or just a need to have a conversation, to reach out to Francis, myself, via the links that we've provided, and we'll get someone to connect with you and figure out how you can get value from this model. So that's really the goal. Back to what I said before, we really want everybody to find value in this. The goal was to say smart grid maturity model was great for the time that we started it, but now the things are changing, the markets, the conditions, the economic environment, the technology footprint that's at our fingertips. And so this was intended to take us to the next 2 or 3 decades of how we can evaluate and move the industry forward. And I'll make one final statement myself, and that is that we've also had inquiries from different industries saying how we have a need for clean electrification, clean energy, and how can we do that from our industry perspective, you know, around sustainability and our goals to go green and whatnot. And so there's so much in this model that extends beyond electric utilities themselves, gas utilities, water utilities, other industries, whether it's automotive or heavy industry or others. So that's a really powerful thing when we can find that not just for the electric utilities, but for other industries, there's commonality. And if we start to see those and get insights into them, we can connect the dots between industries. And that's, again, where the power just increases by order of magnitude. You can see contact information for Kirsten, Francis, and myself on this last slide. As I mentioned, the follow-up email will be coming out, and we really look forward to collaborating with you going forward. A few additional contact us links around blogs, both at APQC, Facebook, YouTube's, etc. So again, find a way to reach out, to connect, and there's a wealth of information if you want to self-serve that you can go out and access through these forums also. But we do hope we'll hear from you in some form and have a conversation. So thanks, Kirsten. Thanks, Francis. Great information. And we appreciate everyone's participation today, and we look forward to the future.